Hey guys, Koki here. I understand many of you are finally getting into echo farming in Wuthering Waves and wants to gear your units out in the best echo setup possible, but might be just unsure how optimal setups for your units look like, which is why I'm going to provide you with a comprehensive breakdown in this video to help you better manage this echo situation. I'll be touching on which active echoes you should select for your units, general guidelines on which echo sets are the best, main stats, substats to go for, and even how to go about farming your echoes to help you make this process as easy as possible. Let's dive right in. First up, we need to understand a few basic echo principles, and why not start with echo cost. Every echo has a different cost assigned to them, and you are able to check this in the echo gallery. Each unit can equip up to 5 echoes, but not exceeding a combined echo cost of 12. With this in mind, we can now look at two preferred setups, with the first being the 4-4-1-1-1 echo setup, comprised of 2 4-cost boss echoes and 3 common 1-cost echoes. This setup uses 11 team cores, with the advantage being that it is much easier to get than the optimal setup, as it is easier to get the perfect main stat rolls on 4-cost boss echoes as compared to 3-cost ones, making it a great choice for early mid-game or for more casual players. However, it is only possible on sets with 2 4-cost boss echoes, namely the Void Thunder and the Sun Sinking Eclipse set, while also being weaker than the 4-3-3-1-1 setup by about 10 to 15% DPS give or take. Speaking of the 4-3-3-1-1 setup, this is what we call the optimal setup as of now, giving us access to not just the crit line on the 4-cost echo, but also an additional 60% elemental damage on the 2 3-cost echoes. This of course comes at the cost of it being much harder to farm, as it is extremely difficult for you to hit the perfect main stat rolls on your 3-cost echoes and the accompanying set as well. Both setups aim to get the 5 set bonus and should be the go-to for any echo setup. Now with the echo setup out of the way, we can now move on to select your active echoes. You are able to choose one echo out of your 5 to use their skills, and to save you time, I've listed the preferable selections for all of the characters for your reference. There might be niche setups yet to be discovered which will veer away from these standard selections, but typically you want to use this. As you can see quite evidently from the chart itself, you always want to go for the boss echoes as your active echoes. Now next up, we will touch on the echo set to choose for your units, and while this is not restrictive by any means, you should in general follow this below guidelines. For DPS units, you almost always want to go for the elemental set corresponding to their elements, for example the Sun Sinking Eclipse for Havoc Rover and the Molten Rift set for Encore. Next, for buffers such as Sanhua and Yang Yang, you will want to go for the Moonlit Cloud set for the attack buff and energy reject. For healers such as Verena and Baizhi, you will go for the Rejuvenating Glow set for the team-wide buff and more healing, although units like Yang Yang can also run the Rejuvenating Glow set with a sword that heals, and for the time being we only have Originate Type 2. A special note though on the Lingering Tunes set, as it can be a great set if you wanna share it across elements, but attack percent usually suffers the most diminishing returns in the endgame, so it might not be a good idea outside of specific team comps that really wants that outro buff. Next, we'll move on to the juicy bit, starting with the optimal main stats you should look out for in an echo. Each echo comes naturally with a main stat that is a fixed value based on the rarity, so there is no RNG over there, and as you can see on the screen right now, credits to Pritwin, you can notice also that the cost of the echo determines which main stat lines they can roll, and notably only 4-cost echoes can roll crit rate and crit damage, while only 3-cost echoes can roll elemental damage percentage. Knowing that, for DPS and buffers, you always want to go for either the crit rate or crit damage main stat on the 4-cost echoes, elemental damage increase on the 3-cost echoes, and attack percent on the 1-cost echoes, with the exception for defense-based units such as Yuanwu going for defense percentage. As for healers, you want to go for attack percentage or healing bonus on your 4-cost echoes, with me leaning more towards recommending you guys to get attack percentage. Since it also scales your healing, it might be a bit more flexible. And also for your 3-cost echoes, you want to go for the energy regeneration percentage, so that you are able to have as as little field time as possible to deal out more damage. And lastly, attack percentage once again for your 1-cost echoes. Now a special note for the crit rate and crit damage selection on your main 4-cost echoes for your DPS units, the simple rule is to look out for the weapon that you are using for the specific DPS. If you already have a weapon that adds crit rate, go for crit damage. However, in the early game, given how it is less likely for you to have multiple crit rate lines, going crit rate either way should be better, since the base crit rate of a unit is 5% and the base crit damage is 150%, which is slightly off from the ideal ratio of 1:2 for crit rate to crit damage that you want to stick to as much as possible so as to maximize your DPS. Now that we have the main stat settled, we can go on to touch on the substats, and unlike the main stat, the substat doesn't come naturally but can only be unlocked when your echo reaches level 5, 10, 15, 20 and 25 respectively. Once you reach the levels as mentioned for an echo, you can then use a tuner corresponding to the color of the echo to reveal the substat. In the case of gold echoes, you'll require premium tuners, and as of now, there is no way to upgrade lower level tuners to the higher level ones, so do keep this in mind as this means that it is a relatively rare resource. Now moving on to the substats roles, there are a couple things to note before we touch on the ideal roles to go for. The first one being you can only roll one line on each substat. For instance, if you roll a crit rate on your first substat roll, you can no longer roll any more crit rates on the echo itself. The second thing is that the substats that you can roll for is the exact same pool for all of the echoes regardless of the cost, and you can see this for yourself on the screen, which means you can collectively look at it from an angle of 25 substats rolls across all 5 echoes. Now for the ideal substats to look for in an echo for your DPS and buffers, you always want to roll crit rate and crit damage and avoid HP and defense. This is simply because these stat lines are much rarer compared to the other stat lines such as attack percentage and will suffer less diminishing returns. Generally speaking as well, buffers in Wuthering Waves are also typically your sub DPS, so being damage focused for them is the way to go. As for your healers, once again the focus is getting energy regen and attack percentage, same as your main stat focus. Now of course, as this is random, you cannot directly control what you get on the substats, but with a good investment strategy, you can maximize the potential gains you get out of leveling these echoes, which can vary based on how much of a sweaty gamer you are. Now before we go into the different levels of sweaty for the echo investment strategy, there are a couple general echo investment tips which include prioritizing your 2 or 3 DPS units as you want your echo setup to be the best for them to clear the end game tower of adversity. I also recommend leaving healer echoes unenhanced outside of maybe the energy regen 3-cost echoes, with the buffers being a second priority once you finish gearing your DPS units. Also, for your DPS units, you preferably want to choose 2 that belongs to the same element so that you are able to share the echo sets on different sides of the towers on different stages, hence saving you valuable echoes resources such as the tuners, the echoes EXP and the time of farming echoes. Now lastly, you also want to go for the gold echoes specifically as the amount of gold tuners you can get initially should be enough for you to gear out your DPS units in full gold sets. Now for people wondering if purple echoes are fine, I think it is totally fine as invested echo EXP is refunded to you at 80% rate, so purple placeholders, especially with the elemental damage piece that is extra hard to get, will serve as an alternative early game. Echoes also refund you tuners at 30% rate for each tune stat, which brings me to my next point, min-maxing echo investment. Now going into the different levels of sweatiness you can go about doing this investment strategy, the first one being the non-sweaty or the casual way, which is to just get the main stat correct, i.e. you can get a crit rate or crit damage and then you go all the way to 25 regardless of the sub-stat pieces. This is because it is not exactly the worst since your main stats give you a lot of bonuses when you level them up. For comparison, an unenhanced gold echo gives you 4.4% crit rate at level 1 but a whopping 22% crit rate at level 25. So even if your sub stats miss, your main stat can never miss and it will definitely buff you up. Just the main stats being the right one will give you a massive boost. With this, you can already tackle the tower adversity. Now of course, I know good enough is not good enough these days, so if you want to go go to the extra mile, you can take one of these sweaty paths to min-max it further. Starting with the first option, it is to min-max your boss echo because it is the most easily farmable echo. You can rack up 3 or 4 of these boss echoes with the correct min stat, and then what you do is to raise the boss echo to level 5, tune it once. If it has crit rate or crit damage roll, you can pretty much continue and finish the echo, otherwise dump it away to the next one, level up to level 5 and repeat the process until you hit either crit rate or crit damage. The next level of sweatiness is to do the same thing but for 1 cost echoes instead, as they are harder to get compared to the boss echoes but easier than the 3 cost echoes, with of course the sweatiest one being the 3 cost echoes. And if you are trying to do this, trying to get both crit rate and crit damage on a piece that has the corresponding elemental damage percentage with the right set, you can already know how difficult it is given how many options there are for you to hit. So I do not recommend going this for now, but in the late game, when you have nothing to do, this is probably what you want to do until you eventually get a piece with the crit rate and crit damage bonus. Now that we know what to go for in our echoes and the exact investment strategy you want to go for, you need to know when to actually start farming echoes and how to optimize the farming process. Well, the first step is to achieve Union level 30 and Data Bank level 15 so that you can first unlock gold echoes. Before that, totally not recommended. After that, you can choose to either fuse your blue and green echoes to obtain random gold echoes for a head start in your data bank, or farm the open world to level up the data bank to level 17. This is a key breakpoint because level 17 will upgrade your drop rate of the gold echo from a 30% to a 50% chance, and you will pretty much stay here for very long because data bank 18 actually adds nothing, and you cannot unlock data bank level 19 because it is locked behind the Union level 40. So 17 is the best level to actually start farming. With Data Bank level 17 under your belt, you can then start farming your perfect 4-cost boss echo first because they are the easiest given how they typically only have 1 set and limited main stat rolls. Now all the boss have a few minutes respawn time, so choose a couple to rotate between if you are looking to farm multiple bosses at the same time. Note that specifically for Dreamless, it is extremely easy to farm it, as all you need to do is to enter the challenge map on the lowest difficulty, should be level 40, kill it, re-enter again, and you can do it instantly without downtime because she respawns immediately. Additionally, another tip for farming boss echoes that are further away from the usual waypoints is to place temporary waypoints on the boss itself to save you some walking time. Every step matters. After you are done getting the 4-cost boss echoes you so desire for your DPS, you can now proceed to farm out the overall normal echoes without specifically target farming, as I feel the efficiency is extremely low, especially at the start if you target farm, since you basically lack so many good echoes in all costs for your multiple units. Hence, why not just go about clearing exploration and clearing everything in your way, and this is what I feel is the best option to amass the most number of desirable echoes. This can be done in 2 ways, first being the solo and second being the co-op, with co-op of course being the more time efficient option, as you and your co-op members all get to control their own units, so you can certainly fight faster. Note that you can also do this for the boss farming portion at the start together if you have a friend that wants to do it, to speed things up if you so wish. The max limit is 3 people co-oping, but you can also do 2 people where the map owner gets to use 2 characters instead of 1. Now lastly, a special mention is that you are able to grab up to 2 selectable echoes in the Elusive Realm shop that allows you to choose the right elemental damage and set for the 3-cost echoes you require. This is really massive, but I would suggest using it only after you have obtained at least 2 other 3-cost echoes with the relevant elemental damage percentage and also the corresponding set, because that way you will avoid getting a dupe from the ones you farm in the WoW, and naturally with these 2 other echoes you can form 2 full DPS with the 3-cost elemental damage percentage covered. Now with all of these tips, you should now be an echo master, and on the way you should go and farm. But if you have yet to reach the Union level 30 requirement, definitely check out this quick 3 minutes video on what you can do to help you get there faster. I'll see you guys over there. This is Corky Gachas, signing off.